Let us go through 8 of these cuts. The standard one. The hard cut is the basic type of cut in editing. This type of cut is utilized when you want to cut from clip to clip without any type of transition, or where you cut from end to end of one clip to the beginning of another. The only downside of the hard cut is that out of all the cuts we talk about, this one gives the least amount of visual meaning. Jump cut. The jump cut is a technique which allows the editor to jump forward in time. We see an early version of this technique in Eisenstein's Battleship Potemkin, where the battleship fires a mortar round and watch the destruction as various angles jump cut from one to another. In this very early version of the jump cut, contemporary audience were introduced to a new way of time passage in film. It obviously gained traction and is one of the most used types of cuts today, next to the hard cut. Another great place to use jump cuts is during an interview, especially if you film the interview with multiple cameras. This allows you to jump from one angle to the other without it being jarred for the audience. L cut and J cut. First, let us talk about the L cut. This editing technique is used not only by narrative filmmakers, but is also a favorite of documentary filmmakers and commercial videographers. What L cut means is that you are hearing the audio from the previous shot, even though we have moved on to another shot. So, the audience is looking at a clip B and still hearing audio from clip A. What is happening here is that the audience is introduced to the voice, and then we are given the visual information on the environment where the voice is located. This technique will keep your film or video flowing naturally, while also giving your audience much needed spatial information. A J cut is essentially the opposite of the L cut. Here we hear the audio before we see the video. So, the audience is looking at clip A, but still hearing audio from clip B.
If you hear a hubbub or a big applause or anything that creates a festival ambience in Malappuram, it is sure that a ball is taken to ground.
This type of cut is used quite often in all forms of filmmaking and videography, but you can see it quite often in content featuring an interview. Cutting on action. The technique of cutting on action is a huge component of, well, action films. Of course, this type of cut can be used on less explosive action as well. The basic idea of cutting for action is that the editor cuts from one shot to another and matches the action of the shots. Editing is all about motivation. Cutaways. Cutaways take the audience away from the main action or subject. These are used primarily as transition pieces to give the audience a view of what is happening outside of the main character's environment. This also goes a long way in helping you emphasize specific details of the mise-en-scene and allowing you to add meaning to them. Cross-cut. The technique of cross-cut, also known as parallel editing, is where you cut between two different scenes that are happening at the same time in different spaces. When done effectively, you can tell two simultaneous stories at once, and the information being given to the audience will make complete sense. In the last 10 years, probably no filmmaker has loved using the cross-cut technique more than Christopher Nolan. He has used this technique on several films and always uses it effectively to connect the various storylines in each film. In his 2010 film Inception, Nolan utilizes the cross-cut technique to aid the audience in keeping up with the various levels of the dream state. Montage. Montage is another technique that has been around for a long time, but isn't used as much as the previous cuts. The idea behind the montage is to use rapid cuts of imagery to help convey the passing of time or to help aid the context of the narrative. There are many different forms of montage. As we said, montage is also used quite often to help the audience through the passage of time. There are great examples of this throughout film history, but one of our favorites is its usage during the original Karate Kid. Editor John G. Avildsen uses the montage to quickly get us through the karate tournament, showing the main character's progress as well as the progress of those he will eventually face. Match cuts. The match cut is the technique of matching the movement or space of two opposite environments together. This technique has been used for many years. It's most effective when you need to move the narrative along, but you need to find a way to connect them together seamlessly. Close-ups. Close-ups are detailed shots of a subject. Small details in these shots appear large on a movie screen. There are different degrees of close-ups, including medium close-ups and extreme close-ups. Over-the-shoulder shots are a type literally filmed over a subject's shoulder towards another subject, usually done during a conversation. Close-ups also move away from the action of a shot to show intimate details of a subject's emotions or draw attention to specific objects. A close-up or close-up in filmmaking and television production is a type of shot which tightly frames a person or an object. Close-ups are one of the standard shots used regularly with medium shots and long shots. Close-ups display the most detail, but they do not include the broader scene. Moving into a close-up or away from a close-up is a common type of zooming. Close-up shots do not show the subject in the broad context of its surroundings. If overused, they may leave viewers uncertain as to what they are seeing. Close-ups are rarely done with wide-angle lenses because perspective causes objects in the center of the picture to be unnaturally enlarged. Certain times, different directors will use wide-angle lenses because they can convey the message of confusion and bringing life to certain characters. Composition. Composition rules and conventions are older than cinema and photography. Most of the concepts under this have been used for thousands of years in painting. Filmmakers and photographers have borrowed many techniques from painters and used them as a springboard for new ideas and practices. Composition refers to how images in a shot are arranged and organized. In other words, composition is the visual order of a shot. This includes how a shot is balanced or arranged in the frame to draw viewers' attention to particular subjects or objects. The space, colors, balance of light and dark and other visual elements are other important aspects of a shot's composition. Composition in filmmaking has many elements in common with composition in painting and still photography. Line, tone, color, texture, shadow. Although cinematography is unique in that the composition may change during the shot. During the shot, the camera may move, the lens may be adjusted, the performers may move, all of which will change the composition of the shot. A performer, for example, might start in a medium shot, but then walk towards the camera, ending in a close-up. Lead room. If a character is looking frame left, then he should be placed frame right. This makes the framing comfortable because the subject is looking at the open space in front of him. This open space is called lead room or lead space. If the actors were frame left, looking frame left, then the empty space would be behind them. This doesn't feel right because they would be looking at the edge of the frame. The proximity to the frame would generate a claustrophobic undertone that could upset some viewers. Notice that when two shots of two actors in two different sides of the screen are intercut together, the audience surmises that the actors are looking to one another, regardless of where they are. Rule of thirds. Another basic composition principle is called rule of thirds. To follow it, one must imagine the frame with two vertical lines and two horizontal lines. as to create 3 vertical sections of the same dimensions and 3 vertical sections also of the same size. The result is something like this in the figure. The rule of thirds is a technique of dividing the frame up into a 3 by 3 grid, splitting your frame into 9 boxes. Our natural impulse is to put our subject dead center, but a centered subject will look like they are caught in a spotlight, and by dropping them in the center of the frame, it gives them nowhere to go. Instead, by positioning your action in any of the 4 vertices where those 9 boxes meet, you can create a balance in your composition that feels more natural. For example, a side view of a person driving a car. On the top left vertex is the driver's head and shoulder, which follows their arm down to the lower right vertex to the steering wheel. This creates a nicely balanced frame of the driver on the top left and the wheel on the lower right. The intersections of the lines are points of interest, where important objects are often placed. These points of interest are comfortable to the eye. Thus, the middle portion of the frame are kept empty or clear. Static composition. Compositions with the majority of lines being horizontal or vertical are called static composition. Dynamic composition. When a composition has many diagonal lines, it is called dynamic composition. The dynamism or excitement comes from the fact that the diagonals are somewhat unsettling.